The state of Overwatch 2. In this video, I'm going to go over the ranked state of the game, the way the meta is being controlled, and the dullness that comes out of playing the game. Overwatch 2 is the sequel to what was one of the greatest video games ever created, Overwatch, and has had some questionable decisions regarding the game's future and the game's current state. I'm going to start off with ranked, because, it's the big thing. The game has failed to provide players with a balanced matchmaking system that can support its team-based gameplay. An example of this is when I deranked to GM4 and I went against the top 1 DPS or one-trick tracer, Akaza, also known as Beastman. While I'm not a bad player myself, I peaked at GM1. If I were a newly ranked player, I would get destroyed by him. It's because of the way the rank system works. If you're GM5, there is a big gap between GM5 and GM1. It's a game sense gap and a little bit of an aim gap. GM1 players, especially high GM1, they're the best at the best. They have mastered the game in a way. But a GM4 player can barely, understand some positionings and some of the better methods of dealing with a certain situation. I mean, I still struggle with that myself, and I'm GM1. It's insane. I haven't even started on the Ziming and Cronus problem of the game. A lot of high-ranking players opt to use a cheating device that allows them to use aim assist with mouse and keyboard. Now, typically, these Zimmers use hit scan heroes and rarely miss shots. I mean, rarely. Like, Kenzo, one of the best PC players, 1v1'd a Zim, and he lost by like 5. It's insane, right? And, Zimming is a problem, but it took them years to make a statement on the matter. And I feel like this is also worth mentioning. The card system is too confusing for players to use. I mean, there are reports of people going like 5-0 and not changing their rank or like barely changing, And this season, I had a 15 loss card. So I lost 15 times, which is the most you can lose on a card. And I'm not the only one. SK, a professional Overwatch player, support like God, also had one of these cards. And these cards are terrible. I mean, imagine queuing and you just see 13 losses. Like you gotta win, right? And it just adds an unnecessary amount of stress to the games afterwards. Moving on from rank, we have balancing problems. I mean, let's use a recent example from this season's patch. According to Blizzard, they stated that Cassidy was in a weak spot, so they decided to buff him, right? And they decided to exchange his range for more health. This change was supposed to make Cassidy a better fighter against characters like Tracer or Genji, but as a cast player, this made him way weaker than before, especially for console players. I mean, going against the Ash Pocket, not even a Zim, is more challenging as the health buff doesn't change Ash's pocket like TTK while making the cast player get closer, which leaves them in a more susceptible position for retaliation. This cast problem made me realize that Blizzard really must not be playtesting correctly. I mean, Lifeweaver and Alari are other great examples of this. Lifeweaver was one of the weakest heroes for months, and it was a big problem because Season 5 had very little to offer, just overpriced cosmetics and a worthless support hero that was a throw pick almost all the time. And then Blizzard decided, okay, it might be okay if we overtune the next hero to make sure we don't get another Lifeweaver problem. But then, the first 2 weeks of Alari were just crazy. She got her ult every fight, causing some of the worst matches I've ever played. And I did PC lobbies and they were even worse. Like, these Alaris just never missed. And then once Alari was added to rank, it was over. She had healing output of Zen, but to her whole team. And she had a great poking weapon for anyone who tries to flank and get close to destroy the turret. Now, possibly the part I hate the most about Overwatch is counter-swapping. Especially for tank players and one-trick players. People want to play the character that they love. Whether it be Cassidy's simple gameplay, or the movement of Tracer or Echo, but counterpicking has created some of the most boring and worst matches possible. I mean, I would play a match where, they would go Doomfist and we would have a Zarya. Maybe the Doomfist would lose, so the Doomfist goes Rein. And then my Zarya will swap to Ram, because it's just back and forth, just counter-swapping. I mean, I played Ramatra. I have like 10 hours on Ramatra against the 1,000-hour Reinhardt, and I won a lot of fights easily. A solution would be to like nerf the damage of Ram's punch whenever it pierces a barrier. So on the other side, it would do like 10 less damage. So it would go from 60 to 50. This would allow some, way around it, so it won't be just such a counter swap to its face. And, in return, you could buff Ramatra's health or his barrier. The game doesn't need to be a counter swap simulator. At the very least, not for the tanks. I mean, as a high GM player, I fight a lot of Dooms, and I play with a lot of Dooms, and they will do really well until the Horse arrives. And then the Dooms become about as worthless as the AI versus player game mode. It is just so bad to see them crumble because they go Orisa. The solution to counter swaps is hard, but I definitely think that some reworks need to be made in order for any progress to be made. The state of Overwatch, it made me lose a little bit of hope because the game has been really bad for like a while. A lot of patches have been kind of disappointing and not really, I don't think it's worth the time investment ever. And so I started playing other games just to, maybe just finally give up Overwatch. I've been playing for so long, it's tough to, support it anymore. So I just branched out, began to do other things. And it sucks because, all of this comes from a place of, like, love, I want the game to succeed, but if Blizzard's not doing anything correctly, then I'm just gonna give up. It's just the way it is.